All right, hello everyone. Hope you all are doing well. Sorry it's been a little slow going getting this class to run. Thanks for bearing with me. And basically, my goal is to give you some nice materials you'll be able to refer back to next semester if you want. Um, yeah, and don't worry too much about the final exam in general. Just in general, I'm cutting back overall besides what you need to just do comprehension checks and that kind of thing, just because of kind of the chaos of the situation. And there are only 4 weeks of school left or so. Um, but I think things have been going pretty well. There's just a couple more topics we have to hit, and I'll give you lots of videos on that. And the fractions homework assignment will be coming out before long. So anyways, without further ado, fraction division. So we'll kind of give two explanations of this. I was talking to my friend who I'm here with in Virginia, our secondary teacher, going to be a secondary math teacher. They had a lot of good things to say about fraction division. So the second explanation of fraction division is due to them. Cool. Okay, so fraction division, what does it mean in the first place? What does division even mean? Multiplication means groups of, that's what we keep repeating over and over. And division has to do with splitting into groups. So we said in class before, 6 divided by 3 equals 2. What does that equation mean in English, in a plain English sentence? 6 divided by 3 equals 2 means the same thing as 6 equals 2 times 3, or 6 is two groups of 3. So this is just like when we said 6 is a multiple of 3, 3 is a factor of 6, mean the exact same thing. It's just kind of, whether you're referring to 6 or 3 in the subject of the sentence, but kind of conceptually it's talking about the same thing, that 6 is a multiple of 3 and 3 is a factor of 6. 6 is a multiple of 3 because 3 is a factor of 6, and vice versa, 3 is a factor of 6 because 6 is a multiple of 3. Mean the exact same thing. It means 6 is 3 times some number. So likewise here, 6 divided by 3 equals 2. Well, we can think of it as just the sentence 6 equals 2 times 3 rephrased slightly. So 6 divided by 3 equals 2 means 6 splits into two groups of 3. That's one way to figure it. That's one way to think about it. 6 is two groups of 3. In other words, we could think of computing the quotient 6 divided by 3 as answering the question, how is 6 related to 3? 6 is what measurement of 3? It's two groups of 3. That's the answer. That's what the quotient. That's kind of what computing a quotient, computing a division, that's kind of what it means in the first place. Always good to be thinking about this. Another way to think about it, as I have illustrated right here, we can think of the quotient. So 6 divided by 3 equals 2. The answer, 6 divided by 3, the answer is 2. 2 is the quotient. That's the vocab word. We can also think of the quotient as the number which fills in the blank in this equation. 6 divided by 3 is equal to the number that fills in the blank in this equation. 6 is what times 3? 6 is how many groups of 3? And it's two groups of 3. So we can think of the quotient as the number which fills in the blank. And this is going to be the crucial part of the first explanation of fraction division. We're going to carry, this is one way of thinking about division for whole numbers, and it's equally good to think of division as this filling in the blank for division of fractions. That's how we're going to explain division of fractions the first way. Yeah, so like I said, 6 divided by 3 answers this question. 6 is how many groups of 3? Good. So what is 6 divided by a half? Let's try to figure that out from scratch. Well, just like before, 6 divided by half is the number which fills in the blank of this equation. And now we can kind of see the answer by guess and check maybe. Multiplying by a half is the same as dividing by 2. 6 is a half times 12. So therefore, 6 divided by a half is equal to 12. And so we're already starting to notice a pattern. And so this comes from our previous video about fraction multiplication. One of the first things we talked about was how to multiply a fraction by a whole number. But we already noticed, and now we're starting to notice a pattern. Dividing by a half is the same as multiplying by 2. There's kind of a flipping thing going on here. 6 divided by half is the same as 6 times 2 over 1. In other words, dividing a fraction is the same as multiplying by the flipped fraction. We'll write this out more explicitly soon. And we can think of it in two ways still. We can think of it as the filling in the blank way, just y is 6 divided by half equal to 12. It's equal to 12 because 12 is the number that fills in the blank in this equation. But there's another way to think about it too. Y is 6 divided by a half equal to 12 because 6 is 12 measurements of 1/2. This is a very nice conceptual explanation. So this is a little picture of that. Here's a picture of 12 half cups of flour. And when all those 12 half cups of flour are put together, what do we get? We get 6 cups of flour. So in other words, 6 is equal to 12 measurements of a half. If I'm in the kitchen and I have a half cup measuring spoon, I need 12 of those measurements to get 6 cups of flour. And that's exactly what computing 6 divided by a half is answering. I want 6 cups of flour. I count them out in measurements of a half. How many measurements of a half is 6 cups? It's 6 divided by a half, which is equal to 12. I need to make 12 measurements. Worth going through this in your own head. It's like this is kind of how the pieces fit together. This is what 6 divided by a half means. And so in everyday life, maybe we think about it more in terms of like multiplication like that. Just, I want 6 cups of flour. How many halves do I need? Technically, you can, if you like, if it helps, you can think of that in terms of fraction division. I need 6 divided by a half cups of flour. That's kind of what it means in the first place. 6 divided by a half is equal to 12. Everybody knows this math stuff like kind of intuitively just from life experience. Just kind of takes but it takes clear thinking to be able to explain it to other people, and trying to get better at that myself. So let's kind of derive in general the rule for fraction division, which you may remember from K through 5 school. So we did one example from scratch. We did 6 divided by a half from scratch. Now we want to be able to answer 4/5 divided by 3/8 from scratch. We're going to derive that fraction division. So like before, what is 4/5 divided by 3/8? It is the fraction which fills in the blank in this equation. And so I said it out loud already. I'll say it out loud one more time. Dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by the flipped fraction. And we're going to derive this rule. So we'll see how to derive the rule from this filling in the blank thing. The quotient is the number that fills in the blank. The quotient of 4 divided by 5, the quotient 4/5 divided by 3/8 is the fraction which fills in the blank of this equation. So how do we fill in the blank in this equation? Well, there's actually a recipe for doing this. What we do, in order to fill, so the quotient is the number that fills in the blank. And I drew that quotient in red. So the quotient 4/5 divided by 3/8 is equal to this red number. It's equal to the number that fills in the blank. And what I'm telling you is there's a recipe for filling in the blank. In other words, there's a recipe for figuring out the quotient of two fractions. And the recipe is to take the divisor, I'll underline the divisor twice in blue, multiply the divisor and the dividend, which I'll underline twice in green, I'll underline 3 times in green, the divisor times the dividend flipped. I'm sorry, I said that backwards. We want 4/5 divided by 3/8. 4/5 is dividend, 3/8 is divisor. The recipe for the quotient is in red. The quotient is the number in red. I'll label it with a Q very nicely. The quotient is the dividend flipped, the dividend is in blue, double underlined, times the divisor, which is triple underlined in green, flipped. That's the recipe for filling in the blank. That's the recipe for the number. Dividend times divisor flipped. And why does this work? Why does this fill in the blank in the equation? Well, let's check that it actually fills in the blank in the equation. Well, the reason why this trick works is because multiplying by this flipped fraction, 8/3 times 3/8 simplifies to 1. And therefore what we're doing is we're checking that the right-hand side of the equation matches the left-hand side, which is 4/5. 4/5 times 8/3 times 3/8. That simplifies to 4/5 times 1, which is equal to 4/5. Excuse that typo. So remember what we're doing. We're figuring out a formula for filling in the blank in the equation. And what this work is doing here is checking that this recipe did actually fill the blank in the equation correctly. And it did, because when we fill in the blank with 4/5 times 8/3, it simplifies to 4/3, which is what we want, right? We want to fill in the blank to get 4/3. And also 4/5 times 8/3 simplifies to 32/15. So what is this saying? This is saying that 4/5. These typos are horrible. I'm so sorry. This is saying that 4/5 divided by 3/8 is equal to 32/15. Why is that? Because 32/15, we checked that fills in the blank. We got the number 32/15 by this recipe, dividend times divisor flipped. And we can see why dividend times divisor flipped always fills in the blank in the equation correctly, because it gives you basically what you want. So kind of the steps of this explanation were, well, finding the quotient of a division is the same as filling the blank in a multiplication equation. And with fractions, there's a recipe for filling in the blank in a multiplication equation, which involves that flipping. And so that's basically the recipe for figuring out the quotient. So we can see kind of the moral of the story here. Dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. In other words, if we retrace our steps in these previous slides, how did we get the quotient? The quotient was equal to dividend times divisor flipped. In other words, starting from scratch, dividend divided by divisor is the same as dividend times divisor flipped. And there's a special vocab word for a flipped fraction, a flipped version of a fraction. It's reciprocal. Reciprocal is a vocab word for flipped fraction. So just some examples. The reciprocal of a half is 2/1, which simplifies to 2. Horrible, horrible typos. My bad. Reciprocal of 3/4 is 4/3. Reciprocal of 9/7 is 7/9. It's just a vocab word. Reciprocal means flipped fraction. So this is running through it again. The quotient 4/5 divided by 3/8 is 4/5 times 8/3, because 4/5 times 8/3 was the number 4/5 times 8/3 was the number that filled in the blank in this equation. 4/5 equals what times 3/8? 4/5 is what measurement of 3/8? Well, the number that fills in the blank is 4/5 times 8/3, because 8/3 cancels with 3/8, and then you're left with 4/5. This is why it works. And then just forgetting all the details about filling the blanks, all you have to remember is dividing by a fraction, dividing by 3/8 is the same thing as multiplying by 8/3. 4/5 divided by 3/8 is the same as 4/5 times 8/3, same as 4/5 times the reciprocal of 3/8. Another example, 3/4 divided by 5/8 is the same as 3/4 times the reciprocal of 5/8, which is 8/5. And that simplifies to 24/20, which is 6/5. And you can check. You can check that this agrees with the kind of the filling the blank thing. What is 3/4 divided by 5/8? Well, we said it's the number that fills in the blank in this equation. 3/4 is what times 5/8? 3/4 is what measurement of 5/8? And you can check. 6/5 is indeed the number that fills in the blank in this equation. 6/5 times 5/8, that simplifies down to 6/8, which simplifies to 3/4. This does fill in the blank correctly. You can check yourself on paper. Cool. Hope that made some sense. Now the second explanation, thanks to my friend here in Virginia. Actually, we kind of figured it out together. Here's another explanation. We'll do an explanation from scratch. What is 1/3 divided by 1/4? And as we said, what this question is answering, what this computation is answering is 1/3 is what measurement of 1/4? 1/3 is what multiple of 1/4? Or also another way of thinking about it, what is 1/3 in times of 1/4? Think of, again, 6 divided by 1/2. 6 divided by 1/2 is equal to 12. Means 6 is 12 groups of 1/2. Kind of, in other words, 6 in terms of 1/2 is 12. If I'm measuring 6 cups of flour, but all I have is a 1/2 measuring cup, I need 12 of those. So it's kind of turning the number 6 into something in terms of 1/2 is a way of thinking about it, I think. Actually, and so what occurred to us is you can explain division just like you can explain it's helpful to explain fraction division just like we explained fraction addition and subtraction. And the idea with fraction addition and subtraction was to get a common denominator. So one of the crucial points from before was given two fractions, you can always turn them into equivalent fractions with a common denominator. That was an important thing. So, and that common denominator has to be a common multiple of both denominators. This will be explained more in the next video still. But 12, for example, is a common multiple of 3 and 4, and so we can turn both 1/3 and 1/4 both into 12ths, is what we're saying here. And here's an illustration of that. 1/3 is equal to 4/12. That's what this picture is showing. 1/4 is equal to 3/12. That's what this picture is showing. This is already looking to be a little bit helpful. You know, 1/4 is equal to 3/12. 1/3 is equal to 4/12. And so now we're ready to discuss, well, what is 1/4 divided by 1/3? What's our new explanation? Well, we turn the original question, what's 1/4 divided by 1/3, into what's 3/12 divided by 4/12. Well, 3/12 divided by 4/12 is the same as 3 divided by 4. Because 3/12 divided by 4/12, it's asking what measurement is 3/12 of 4/12. Well, that's the same as asking what measurement. It's going to be the same answer as what measurement is 3 of 4, because kind of the units are the same. We're just changing into different units. It's all proportional. 3 is what measurement of 4? It's 3/4. 3 is 3/4 of 4. I think that makes sense. 3 is 3/4 of 4. Let me draw 4 dots. 3 is 3/4 of 4 because what's a fourth of 4? It's a unit, 1. A fourth of 4 is 1, and 3 ones is 3. What's 3/4 of 4? 3/4 of 4 is 3/4 times 4, which is equal to 3. So this is just kind of a long-winded explanation of the fact that 3 is 3/4 of 4. That's worth saying out loud. And now 3/12 is also 3/4 of 4/12. Why is that? Because we're just, instead of counting units, we're counting twelfths. 3 is 1, 2, 3, 4 counts of a twelfth. A third is 1, 2, 3, 4 counts of a twelfth. A fourth is 1, 2, 3 counts of a twelfth. So what proportion is 3/12 of 4/12? It's 3 divided by 4. In other words, 3/12 divided by 4/12 is equal to 3/4. We can kind of think of this in terms of clearing the denominator also. Let me just draw this over here. 3/12. You can see this visually. 3/12 divided by 4/12. It's equal to 3/4. Kind of, this is why people talk about clearing the common denominator in division or something like that. 3/12 divided by 4/12. Somehow these 12s are canceling out. Basically, if you divide fraction by fraction with same denominator, you can just pretend the denominators don't exist, basically. But that's the reason why is the explanation we just gave. 3 is 3/4 of 4. In the same way, 3/12 is 3/4 of 4/12. Because we're just talking about proportions, we're just talking about same units. 3 cups of sugar is 3/4 of 4 cups of sugar. In the same way, 3/12 cups of sugar is the same way as 3/4 of 12 cups of sugar, because we just change units from cups to 12 cups is one way of thinking about it. So just another, we'll wrap up with, we can do another example. What's 7/8 divided by 9/6? What's our new method for fraction division? Turn them into common denominator. So least common denominator of 8 and 6 is 24. 7/8 is 21 over 24. Multiplying numerator and denominator both by 3. 9/6 is 36 over 24. Multiplying numerator and denominator both by 4. And what's 7/8 divided by 9/6 now? It's 21 over 24 over 36 over 24. We can forget about the common denominator because it's all proportional. 21 over 24 divided by 36 over 24 is the same as 21 over 36. Forget about the common denominator. Cool. Hope you found this video helpful. There'll be more coming soon.